I have to say that this contest on ceramics projects throughout the years has become a sort of a privileged observation point. Let's say that this has become once again a very important contest if you really want to get into the so-called project universe, especially if you want to monitor, take part into this universe, describing, the different steps, the flows, inflows, outflows, growth and innovation. I've been taking care of this since 2012, so basically more than 8 years. Now, in historical terms, but also in critical terms, this is a sort of unity, as I like to say. This is surprising for me, and it also went beyond my most optimistic expectations. The expectations I had when I've been invited, by you and Josiah, to take part in the jury. I have to say that, we have used, more and more ceramics. So we can see that ceramics is more and more often used. Now, we know what happened in Italy between the mid-50s and then all the way to the end of the 1970s. That was, if you will, the golden season of Italian ceramics, in terms of innovation, product and concept. Just think of many different authoritative people. For example, Gio Ponti. Now, Gio Ponti was a fanatic. He had an obsession. He said that it was impossible to corrupt ceramics, so the most modern material ever. I also would like to remember Enzo Mari, the great master, who just recently passed away. And then back in the 1970s, he made so much artistic research in a very audacious, in a very original way. And once again, he also worked with and for ceramics or ceramic materials. He said that this was a democratic art, an art for all, an art that you could find in, every kind of dwelling. So after that time, a second sort of period, came in. We saw, let's say, the coming of new materials, hyper-technological materials. Now, materials that apparently replaced, the daily situation of modernity. And of course, I'm thinking of the 1980s of the past century. What we see today, and this is, by the way, very significant, we can see that architects today, especially young architects, and by the way, this is a sort of an open door to optimism for the future. I have to say that, young architects now are really using and, let's say, becoming familiar, if you will, with this material. This is a hypothesis I have in my mind, and I think that this kind of familiarity is based in two different motivations or conditions. The first one is that architects are now rediscovering the value of the matter, and especially today in a hyper-technological universe. This is what we can see all around us, and we are experimenting all of this in a very special condition, which is today's lockdown. So we have the so-called, digital text commands. So in the past, we have highlighted, the material features, the virtual features, and a sort of a transfiguration of architecture into possible worlds, which are, visually described thanks to computer-generated images. But we have forgotten something. We forgot one of the key components that we have, especially today because of the lockdown. This is a priority. I'm talking about the body, the bodily senses, the sense of matter, and even tactile senses. It sounds absurd, but just think that, what we are told today is to respect the social distancing. So social distancing is a psychological distancing, while architecture has always, favored a different idea. I mean, every space is a space for aggregation. Now, we cannot touch each other. We cannot, shake hands. This is a very simple, encounter gesture or archetypical gesture. Well, we are now rediscovering that the matter has a value because, temporarily we have lost it. I think that this is a sort of a disruption. So we are rediscovering the hand. We are rediscovering the fact of, being tactile. And the visual image cannot replace, totally the tactile sense. So the touch, and this is what ceramics can do for us. I mean, it gives us exactly these answers. Ceramics basically come from the earth. It is a material that, went through many different processes. I mean, just like GMOs for cereals. I mean, ceramics today is much more than earth or an earth blend or an earth mix. It's a specific combination of agents, also chemical agents that you introduce inside, the core of the matter. But anyway, ceramics, once again, is something that really comes from the hands of men and women, especially when we, like today, use very sophisticated, machines to make ceramics. At the end of this creative process or processing system, and then once again improvements and production. So, what remains at the very end? So, why are we doing this? Well, we do this because we create a highly tactile object. It is rough, it is three-dimensional, it has a color. So this object is telling us that we have a primary need. This is really very important. I mean, this is one of the key features of Italian architecture in the 20th century, so in the past century, the so-called modernity century. And there was a distinction between, the modernity approach in Italy and the modernity approach in other countries like the UK, France, and Germany. So that differentiator has always been the relationship with the presentation or representation model. If you consider, some of the greatest Italian architects, well, in all of their projects and in all of their architectures, there's always a reference to art, painting, fresco, maybe a tapestry, maybe sculpture. So these elements are much more than decorative elements. I mean, they sort of become dynamic forces, breaking into projects that want to represent the space of human beings. There are wonderful projects from Gio Ponti, back in the 1940s. For example, there's an example of a house, a building, totally made of ceramics. And he says that we can really feel the matter. We have to, walk into that building barefoot because we need to feel the texture of ceramics. I think that this is a DNA which we still have in our blood. Now, of course, it is changing. I mean, every single generation changes it and adapts it to specific, needs. But I think that this is very reassuring for me. I mean, the idea that this value of ceramics has just been rediscovered for indoor but also for outdoor applications. I would like to say that there's another factor that has, generated all what I'm saying. So, on the one side, we have architects rediscovering these values, but on the other side, we have something different. And by this, I mean that there's a new innovation factor. We can name it creative invention. It comes from the ceramics industry universe. For example, once again, back to Gio Ponti. Well, I apologize for this, seamless flow of quotations from Gio Ponti. Gio Ponti said, art is falling in love with industry. And this is what he said in the 1930s. Artists are now understanding the reasons of industry, and they produce an artistic industry. Well, we can say today that also the contrary is happening. I mean, the industry is falling in love with art. And by this, I'm talking about the entrepreneurs and then the R&D staff in the large, tile makers. So they are now falling in love with art. And this is why they have worked a lot on improving machines, machine tools, production, and even inventing new formats. I mean, now the Italian ceramics industry, even if there's a lot of competition, they have created the large format idea. This is completely changing, I mean, the current ceramics scenario, if you will, and even the combination between ceramics and architecture, or ceramics and the building industry, or the construction industry. This is unprecedented. I mean, those slabs are now becoming design objects or technical, wall tiles. This is what happens, in a nutshell, in the past 20, maybe 30 years. I have to say that some time ago, we could say that, design was sort of giving a hint to ceramics, or, well, we can say today that ceramics has become one of the sector of design. And so this is a non-secondary, it is now a priority part of a big mix of, sectors. This is what we used to call design.